So I never really considered doing a video on how to replace a Dreamcast clock battery, but I see a lot of bad information out there, so I figured I'd just go ahead and make this video to try to rectify some of it. I'll start with the things you don't want to do. The biggest thing I see people suggesting that other people do is to use a CR2032 battery or some equally non-rechargeable battery. The Dreamcast is going to try to recharge any clock battery in there, and if that battery is not designed to be recharged, it will damage the battery. Worst case scenario is a fire, which I doubt, but it will definitely cause it to leak over time, and that battery acid will leak out and get over the battery holder, and it will get over the board that it's attached to, which is the controller board, and damage that board. So it doesn't really make sense to do that. Another thing I see often is people using scotch tape or some kind of tape to hold a battery in there, which I also think is a pretty bad idea. And maybe you're thinking like, oh, it does the same job, but actually if that adhesive dries out, which it most likely will, it's in the Dreamcast, it's warm in there, right? The Dreamcast actually does get kind of toasty inside. If that adhesive dries out, it will the battery will come loose, and the battery being metal and conductive could bridge a connection inside the Dreamcast, and best case scenario, it will cause your Dreamcast to just kind of randomly shut off or reset. Worst case scenario is if it bridges the wrong connection, it can cause damage to the Dreamcast. So that's something I wouldn't really recommend doing. And the third thing is not really something I'd say don't do, because it's not bad. But the third thing is that people get a essentially what looks to be like the original battery that the Dreamcast came with and solder it in there, which works fine and it lasts a long time. But when it's done, when the battery's dead, it will have to be desoldered and have a new one soldered in there, which is more work than needs to happen. And if you end up selling the Dreamcast or giving it to somebody who doesn't know how to do that, they're kind of SOL. So what I'd recommend doing is using a battery holder, and that way you can easily swap out the battery if it dies. So I'll start with the materials that you will definitely need, and then I'll move on to some of the things I'm using as optional. So the battery you're going to want is an ML2032. This is a 3-volt rechargeable coin cell battery. This is the one I'm using. The last 4 digits on these batteries, 2032, tells you the size it is. So the 20 means it's 20 millimeters in diameter, and the 32 means it's 3.2 millimeters deep. This is important because it's going to fit in a lot of the holders that you find out there. A lot of the battery holders out there are made for CR2032s. So you're going to have a much easier time getting a battery holder that's more common, and it's also going to be cheaper. So this is the battery I recommend. Definitely make sure it's 3 volt. Definitely make sure it's rechargeable. These are battery holders that I got on Amazon. I didn't pay much for them. I think under $10 there's 20 of these, which is great. And these are, like I said, the very common size for 2032 batteries. So you'll want these. You'll also obviously need screwdrivers. I'm using 2. See, this one will not slip in the tiny little holes to remove the shell, so I use this one instead. The problem with this one is the point is very fine, so it's difficult to unscrew some things, and I don't want to strip any of the screws. And you'll need a soldering iron. I have this one right here. It's adjustable. It's pretty cheap. I got it at Micro Center on one of my spending sprees. I go to IKEA to get furniture because I need furniture, and then I go to Micro Center because I want to, and end up spending way more than I do at IKEA. So soldering iron is useful, or necessary rather, and of course solder, to solder the new battery holder in there, and also to help desolder. So on to the optional things. Like, you're going to want to remove the old battery holder, so you can either heat it up with the soldering iron and wiggle it free, which isn't a terrible idea. I prefer to use a this is called a solder sucker. It sounds dirty, and I guess it could be dirty, but yeah. So you basically push this in, and once the solder is molten, you put the tip right on the joint and click that, and it sucks the solder out. I'm using flux as well. this Dreamcast I'm using, I opened it up to clean it and make sure it's all good inside, and it really seemed like it had never been opened. That means that there's a lot of dirt and dust and dingy crap all over the board, so it's going to be harder to solder without flux, so that's why I'm using some flux here. I have a Q-tip to apply it, by the way. And let's see, anything else? Yeah, these little tweezers, if a screw comes loose, it helps just grab it easily. Not really necessary at all. So to start, you're going to want to remove the top shell off the Dreamcast. So just flip it over, and you remove the modem first, and you just press this tab in and pull it out. I'm going to put it against my chest to do this because it's easier. I'll try to do it on the camera first, actually. Let's see if I can do this. And, you know, if these things... Oh, that was easier than I thought. If these things aren't opened often, they're harder to take apart. So, and now you have 4 screws in each corner. So one here, 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 and here. So I'm just going to remove all 4 screws. Sometimes I like to place it down on something so it doesn't wobble too much, but oh well. And I'll say that if you're worried about soldering, don't be. I actually have a very unsteady hand, and I get by just fine by simply just controlling my breathing and trying to relax as much as possible. I also just came from the gym, so I'm fucking tired too, so I'm probably going to be worse now. We'll see. Oh, came out. There we go. So also have this little tray. It's magnetic. You just plop whatever screws down on there. This is really handy because I obviously work on several projects at once. I get stuck or frustrated or need to order a part, so I put it aside, but I don't put it back together because that's more work. So I'll leave these screws in here. And that's why having that big one is kind of nice. So press down pretty hard. Probably should have done this first, but definitely before you take the top shell off. I've already done it, but open up the Dreamcast. Make sure you don't have a game disc in there. I've done that. I've gotten very close to it. And then I remember I have something in there. And if that game's expensive, that's going to be... You could scratch it because the this is the GD-ROM drive, which is separate from the case shell. So you're pulling the shell out and the disc is attached to the drive. So just pull the shell upward like this as it is on its feet, and you're good. So this is the controller board, which is where the battery is attached. So what you're going to want to do is remove this board so that it's easier to work with. First thing you want to do is there's this ribbon cable. I'm going to zoom in here. Hold on. Hold on there, boy. Easy. It's okay. I think I have autofocus on. I hope I do. So you have this ribbon cable here, which is attached to the motherboard and the controller board. Don't remove one side. Just wiggle the whole thing free from left to right. The reason I say that is because these ribbon cables are immensely fragile. The older they are, the more fragile they are. And if you bend them too much, it could cause one of the tiny little connections to break. And the ribbon cable's almost useless. Like, you can solder a wire in place, but that's a pain. So just take the whole thing out. And the next thing you have is the fan header. So what you'll want to do is these boards, this is the... one type of controller board. I've seen another, green PCB or green board. Usually the header is better connected on those green ones. On these tan ones, it's not. So the header wobbles. So what I do is I put my finger down on it, and from these cables, just pull the header out, or the fan cable out. And then if you want to, you can stick a dab of hot glue on either side to secure this header. And now the controller board is attached with 4 screws. These are longer than all the other screws in the Dreamcast, so they're easy to differentiate. You have 2 inside here and 1 on either side here. So just remove them. There you go. Okay, so you have all those 4 screws removed. Make sure you have the ribbon cable and the fan disconnected. And pull this plastic controller port cover out a little bit, and then pull the board up. Now you can put the Dreamcast aside. What I recommend doing is putting the shell back on top so that you protect the laser lens here. There you go. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut and, I'm going to put a piece of board under here because I'm going to use a soldering iron. And I'm also going to take a piss. Okay, so now you probably want to plug in your soldering iron and let it start heating up. So that's what I'll do. What I'll do now is I'll flux these joints. I'll show you the joints that we're after. So this is the battery right here, and it's connected through 3 joints on the bottom here. This one, and this one in the middle here. So I want to flux those, and then when you're desoldering, you want to put a little dab of solder on each joint and then desolder them. So this is nearly hot enough, and I'm just going to tin each of these 3 joints. Now with the solder sucker, I'm going to, I can't line it up there. Press this tab in, load it up, apply heat to the joint for a second or 2 and get it molten, and then I press this button and suck the solder up. So that was that, but I probably didn't get it free the first time. Oh, I did. Okay, that was easy. So with the solder free, you can just wiggle out the battery, and I thought I got it free. I believe I did. Let me see here. Yep, yeah, they're free. Okay. Just going to move those legs a bit to help it free up, and there's your dead battery. So from here, it's actually pretty simple. All you really need to do is solder the new battery holder in and put the new battery in. So what I'll do is I'll turn down the temperature on the iron a bit, because I wanted a higher temp for soldering. I'm sorry, for desoldering the old battery. However, now that I have desoldered it, you really don't want a super high temp, especially because there's some traces around here. I don't want to destroy those. And yeah, higher temp is probably not a great idea. And these can only fit in one way, because you got one leg here and then the 2 legs in the rear. So I had peanuts. I'm trying to eat healthy, and yeah, peanuts calls are getting fucking stuck in my throat. So just place the battery holder in. Yep, line it up. There you go. Press it down. You can see it's in there now, and it's pretty firm, but I'm going to rest the top against the board here, and then I'll solder in the new holder. Alright, so now that that's done, I'm actually going to pick the board up and take a close look at it and make sure that I did solder those joints there. Looks like, yep, they are. Actually, good thing I did. This last leg right here is not soldered there. So let me get a little bit more on there. No, it's not really wicking to that joint. I might want to... There we go. That's good. So I'm just going to let it sit for a couple seconds. Pick it up, inspect it again, and just give it a tug. Make sure it's in there securely. So let me get a look at this guy. Looks good. The joints are pretty shiny. Right here, here, and here again. And yeah, it's in there and it's firm. So all I need to do is place the battery in there now. So I'm going to go ahead and attach it to the Dreamcast again, and then put the battery in there, and it's done. So I'll take the shell off here that I put on just to protect the lens. Put the controller board back in here. Put the actual ports in there first, in this gray part. Kind of angle it in, and then it'll slip in pretty easily. Then I'll throw these 4 screws in here. I'm going to put the middle one in first to make sure it stays put. Yeah, see. Alright, that's in there, so I'll attach this fan cable now. Yeah, you bastard. There you go. And the ribbon cable, just put down back in there. So put that in there. That I can tell that the one attached to the board isn't tight. Now it is good. Make sure you get that the board side in there tight, because it may be a little tricky. And now just throw the battery in there. So this is your battery. And right here is the positive side. And the holders I have are marked. But what you'll want is the label end facing toward the GD-ROM drive. Just like that. And there you go. Your Dreamcast will save games for the foreseeable future, 5 to 10 years. So now I just put the top of the shell back on. Make sure that ribbon cable's in there. I don't have to unplug it. So what you can do is if you're a little nervous, like, oh no, it's not going to work, just throw in 2 screws if you're worried. Or if you know you have to open it up again. And then take the modem, put it back on, and it's time to test it. So I was going to go through the process of me testing it and show you that, but instead of that, I'm just going to explain how to test it so that this video isn't an extra 5 minutes. All you're going to want to do to make sure that your Dreamcast clock battery works is turn on the Dreamcast without a disc in and then set the time. After that, put a disc in, play it for a few minutes to allow the battery to charge if it's not already charged. Then, turn the Dreamcast off, unplug it, press the power button twice, once for what would be on, once for what would be off. Keep in mind it's unplugged at this point. After that, wait maybe 30 seconds and plug it back in, turn it on, and check to see if the time has stayed. If it has, you've successfully completed the mod, and you can go about playing. And that's it. Thanks for watching. I know that not everybody tells you to do this the wrong way. I know there are people out there telling you the correct way to do this. But these are things I've learned through a period of time. So what I wanted to do was just aggregate everything together to make it very easy to replace your clock battery on your Dreamcast and make it so that you don't have to go to multiple places to find out the best information.
No, no! You must be the one who took my skooma.